I'm going to get into trouble if I don't ask any of the millions of questions that have come in from our listeners, Michael, and some of them you have covered off already. So, but the first one I've got on here, and I suppose this comes with the idea of opportunities, especially for, and I know we're an international show, but naturally when you have four British blokes on the podcast, there is going to be a little bit of a sway here, so apologies for that, but we're going to go with it, because Speed and Conviction has asked on Instagram, the future of British riders, what is the ideal path? Now, he said, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but my 5-month-old son wants to be ahead of all the European riders. So what do you say to someone who is right at the start? What is the, in an ideal world, to get to let's say, to get to MotoGP, what is the ideal path? Because there is so much talent, not just as you described, coming up through the ranks in Great Britain, but, you know, internationally, there is huge, arguably, people are going to fall by the wayside, aren't there? Because there's so much talent and there aren't enough opportunities.
Yeah, and that's the thing, actually. When you look back to the 80s, 90s, it was there was riders coming through in their mid-20s because they'd had to earn the money to go racing themselves and go kind of drudge out their own path and make their own career, whereas now there are opportunities from such a young age, and unfortunately you have to have parents who have that desire to have you at kart tracks from your 6-7 years old on little mini bikes. But yeah, I would say the ideal path for me is when you're young, when you're 5, 6, 7, you're experiencing a little motocross bike, a little bike that slides and drifts, and actually not getting too involved in the racing scene because you don't want to burn out. You want them to have a passion for the sport. So those early years, do it for fun, experience a few different disciplines. Then when you are, say, 7, 8 years old, onto mini bikes and actually learning some racecraft, getting in amongst it in your national mini bike scene. Then from 10 years old, that's when it needs to be a bit more structured. And when you're around about 12, then starting to add training and nutrition into the program, and then tougher competition and trying out different bikes as well, getting those opportunities on. So in mini bikes, it's all 10 and 12 inch wheels. Then you got to learn how to ride 17-inch wheels when you get up onto a Moto3. That's where Spain do it so well. They've got Moto5s and Moto4s and pre-Moto3s, all different varying horsepower engines inside those 17-inch wheel chassis. So, and they're pretty much proper little race chassis. We don't have that in the UK, but I plan to get hopefully a couple of Moto4 bikes that we could use on kart tracks over here, just to give the kids experience, bridge that gap. So yeah, there's a lot of different opportunities available of what path you could take, but I think a lot of it has to boil down to the finances, not spending too much when you're young, not treating the kids like a little robot and a professional, and you know, cracking the whip on them. You essentially want them to love this sport. You need to love it if you want longevity. And so yeah, instill that passion from an early age, take them to events, let them witness their idols, or make sure the guys at the top of the sport become their idols. And then, yeah, exactly. Just give them all those opportunities to learn what a bike feels like when it's drifting, when it's moving, when it's sliding. Then the inputs on racecraft, then that can only come with race knowledge and getting in there and racing in those championships.
But 5 months might be a bit too soon.
The other way,
yeah.
The other way, of course, has been the Jorge Lorenzo way and the Randy Mamola way. If you look at the way that their peers or their parents treated those guys, I mean, Lorenzo had the whip cracked over him, didn't he, at the time? And I think that Mamola as well was pushed very hard, very, very early on. So there's got to be a balance somewhere in between those two ways, isn't there?
Definitely, that's the key. I think obviously that way works. You get success from it. You get a fast young rider, but it can go the other way. You can burn them out. I've seen it so much. American motocross is a perfect example for that, because they have an industry where the manufacturers support kids because they want to find their next supercross rider who's ready to go at 15. And their youth system is it's run like a professional race series, and so many young fast kids that burnt out, that reached their mid-teens and they were over it. They had their best years when they were 10 years old. So there is that fine balance, and it is sometimes finding the right people that actually take the kids away from the parents, because you know that parent influence, it always ends up the relationship breaks at some point.
That's why I'm surprised that Wayne Gardner stepped back. I thought he'd be the kind of personality that would be banging Remy's door all the time and giving him a hard time. And then we've got the situation that you'll be quite close with. I mean, we can talk about Remy if you like, but I've always been intrigued by the Casey Stoner story. And of course, at the end of the day, your family, your wife's family are very, very close with Casey. I mean, because when he came over here at a very young age with his parents, spent a lot of time with those guys. And yet he did burn out very, very early. Luckily, as a world champion and a multi-millionaire, which is not a bad way to leave things, I suppose. But at the end of the day, he left us really, really early. His talent wasn't done as far as I was concerned, and yet he was.
Exactly that. And obviously, they'd spent a lot of time with us here when they were in the UK. Casey was very friendly with Chaz, and so I got to know Casey quite well over the years. And he did lose his love of the sport. Not the sport. He loved riding bikes, but he lost the passion for the travel and all the stresses and doing the media commitments and whatnot, but he still loved to ride his bikes, but he just couldn't find a way to do that and still travel. Well, actually, the championship's going to be 21 rounds next season, but it was a big commitment. So he burned out too early. His talent could have gone on easily at that level for another 5 or 6 years if he had that desire. So that is the flip side of the coin. I think they have the extra stresses of moving away from Australia. So you're so far from home for such long periods. And he did make his home in Europe, but he never quite felt at home. I know he lived in an apartment in Monaco for a lot of years, and it was soul destroying for him. He's from the bush, loves the outdoors, loves the open spaces, and he just didn't have that. So there's a lot of factors go in there. The stresses of making it through when they didn't have a lot of money behind them. Then when he was successful, then you argue over the money, and it's a tough one to find that perfect scenario. A raw talent, he was a raw. In the end, a polished diamond, he could do everything, but he was just such raw speed whenever I first witnessed him in the UK. And he went on to great things. But Colin saw that from such a young age, so he knew that he had that potential.
Fantastic potential he had. But I think he'd be looking at the calendar at the moment that they're proposing for next year and thinking, what? Have you looked at it? What do you make of that?
Yeah, that is going to be a tough one. It is. Well, obviously, for us on the Moto3 side, we get less testing, so you've only the one preseason test, but still 21 rounds over a season, and then you've got multiple flyaways. Your flyaways at the start of the year, then obviously at the first section in Asia, then in Australia. So it's going to be a lot of time on the road, and I feel more for the mechanics that obviously the riders, it's one thing because they have the passion to jump on the bikes, but for the mechanics that adds an extra stress or an extra weekend away, more time on the road. It's going to be tough, but we knew it was going that way, and I can foresee it going to 22 races in the future. I think that might be the ceiling, 22, but it makes it a long season. But there are a number of venues that want on the calendar, and obviously if it makes commercial sense, they will happen.
It really is a very lengthy character. It seems like throughout motorsport, they're getting longer and longer every year. But it's interesting because there is still a bit of doubt. Pete, I know you've got a little bit on this as well with the Indonesia track, the new one that's going to come in hopefully for next year for World Superbikes and MotoGP. But even that is looking a little bit in doubt at the moment. But they think it's all good. Can you just fill us in a bit about what's going on there?
Well, there was this announcement from WADA a few days ago saying that the national organisations for Indonesia and Thailand have been declared non-compliant. Now, there's different reasons for each of those rulings. I think with Thailand, they haven't legally incorporated the latest rules or something like that. Indonesia was more to do with the sending of samples, and that seems to have been affected by the pandemic. So it's a bit unclear what the implications of this sort of non-compliance are, because when you look at what they could be, it says it could affect the hosting of World Championships. Well, World Superbike is supposed to go there in November, so there's not much time to sort something out. Now, the Indonesian sports minister is sort of assured that everything will be sorted out by then. So we'll have to sort of wait and see at the moment exactly what happens there. The one thing we do know is that it doesn't affect the individual riders from those countries. So that's clear. You've got people like Somkiat Chantra in Moto2. Those guys don't have to worry. It doesn't change anything for them. But certainly a bit of a question mark there for the Indonesian rounds, especially because they're first on the calendar. Thailand is due to go back to October for 2022. So they've got basically a year to sort this out.
Well, we'll be watching that one and bring you all the latest as well on crash.net. On the subject of tracks, and I want to steer things sort of onto this current season that we're enjoying, a brilliant season of MotoGP racing. And Michael, Carolyn Hughes has asked, what is your favourite track, both UK and worldwide?
Worldwide would be Phillip Island. I think it's just such a lovely ribbon of tarmac and such a picturesque location. Any rider who rides there in those high-speed corners, wheel spinning, it's just unsurpassed anywhere, the experience of riding that circuit. And if I was going to choose a UK track, it would be Silverstone. I love although it doesn't have the elevation that everyone loves about Donington or Oulton Park or Cadwell Park, it's got such high-speed corners. It's got a lot of history, and actually to ride that track, for me, it's one of the best in the world. The flow and how the corners link together, and then obviously the new surface they laid down a couple of years ago. I got to test it on a Moto2 bike, and it was fantastic. So I would say I would pick Silverstone to go, and I'm actually going there tomorrow for a Yamaha day, just for a bit of a spin out in R1 myself, because I do love to just get out there when the opportunity presents itself. So yeah, those would be my two favourites in UK and worldwide.
Keith, go on. I'll ask you the same question.
Well, all of my world was in black and white, and I perhaps don't go quite for the same safety situation, but Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, if you ignore the fact that things are a little closer there than you perhaps want them, there's no atmosphere for me like anywhere else than Brands Hatch in this country. Moving on to worldwide, it's going to be Mugello. I mean, the track that's there now is it's just superb. It's just in a great place. I think for me, atmosphere has a lot to do with it as well. I think that I love the atmosphere of those two racetracks, and I don't think you can beat them for that. But I've never ridden Phillip Island, so I can't comment on that. But obviously, every rider I know says Phillip Island. The only thing that the downside of Phillip Island is you're going to have to wait 10 years for a decent set of weather for the weekend. It can either be blowing a bloody gale or freezing cold, or it might be warm, maybe. I was very lucky. The first year I went there ever was in 2014, and the weather was beautiful. And I remember thinking, what's the matter with everybody? They all say it's going to be cold here. It's T-shirt weather. But every other time I've been since, it's been bloody freezing and blowing a gale. I don't call one of the corners Siberia for no reason. But I can understand Phillip Island, but I've never actually ridden it. I mean, Turn 1, they call it Duans, and I can understand why they call that one Duans as well. It's just one of the scariest corners anywhere in the world, I would think. You have got to be right on your game to get in there far. So, but no. Yeah. Long story short, Brands Hatch and Mugello.
Top choices, I would say. Thank you, Carolyn, for that question. And we've had as well a lot coming in on the subjects of this season in MotoGP, particularly Fabio Quartararo, of course, leading the championship. Michael, what have you made of this season so far? I think it's been a brilliant year of racing overall, and Fabio Quartararo obviously standing out and standing tall amongst the rest. And Ricky, I've picked up his question. Ricky Don has sent in this: why is Fabio so good and the rest of the Yamahas just can't seem to make it work as well as he can?
The $1 million question for both Yamaha.
There we go. Yeah,
riders.
you got it.
I think Frankie Morbidelli, without the injury, would have been at a similar level with similar equipment to Fabio. Obviously, he was in the older bike, but for Valentino, I do think there's an element of the bike development path going a different way to his riding style. As of tires, they've gone a little bit softer in recent years. He likes a stiffer construction. He likes a bike that stops and goes, whereas now the Yamaha is all about corner speed, releasing that front brake and carrying momentum through the turn the way Jorge Lorenzo has done and the way Fabio does naturally. So they have clicked. Fabio and the Yamaha are a perfect pairing. They are in unison. Whenever you see them, the way he rides the bike, it's just like gliding around the racetrack. I think last year he definitely struggled a little bit. That he was outperformed by his teammate, which was the first time, and he had really succeeded in his rookie season, and he had outclassed Fabio or Frankie then. So I think the psychological impact on that last season took a bit of getting his head around, and he went to work on that over the winter, and he's come back such a stronger package, and he's been so consistent on his off days to still be in the top 5, to be battling for podiums whenever he really shouldn't be. That's the mark of a champion. That's where he's, for me, made the difference this season, being able to negate those bad days and be so consistent. And he's phenomenal. I think when you watch him on his time attacks, his qualifying laps, now he's transferred that into ultimate consistency throughout the race. He is the real deal.
He probably is. And actually, this is going to be unfair. Now, right at the start of our podcast way back in, I think, when did we start this? May. We all sort of submitted our top 3 for the end of the championship. Probably a little bit foregone conclusion to ask you, but I'm going to ask you, Michael, to name your top 3. Your top 3. Are there going to be any changes, do you think, or is it a pretty done deal?
I think 1 and 2's done with Pecco and Fabio. I would like to say Jack Miller will find his form to get that 3rd place. It's a difficult one to say. I think the Suzukis are still there. They still have a little bit of potential, but it's a tough one to say the 3rd. Who did you guys plumb for as your top 3 then? Was this pre-season you selected?
It was during the summer break, so a lot. In my defence, a lot has changed, and I'm much newer to the 2-wheel world. I come from 4 wheels, so just a bit of a caveat here. I think I went Quartararo, but then no, I didn't. I didn't go. Oh my god, I put Zarco first because at the time he was doing so. I went Zarco, Quartararo, and I can't remember. Oh, I've got it written down. I can't remember who's 3rd, but I think you both went Quartararo, I think, didn't you, Keith and Pete? It would be stupid not to now.
Not getting involved.
No, anyway.
I was quite pleased to see that even the boffin, Michael Laverty, was a bit cautious about who he was going to say in 3rd place, which is the name of our game. MotoGP is so tricky. I mean, I actually, because I'm not miles in front of Pete and Harry when it comes to these predictions every week, I actually had a look today. I actually did some processing this morning. I thought, I've got a bit of time. I'll have a look and see. And I still can't make me bloody mind up. If Joan Mir could actually qualify, if Mir could qualify, then he'd be there or thereabouts. But he always gives himself too much work to do. Where we're going next time, Misano, it's a great track. It works well for Suzuki. But somehow he's always having to come through from, what those first couple of corners are like. I mean, in the first lap, you can be pushed off, pushed out, pushed down, and your race is done early on already. But there you go. I love the way. I think during the course, 14 different riders. I actually wrote it down. 14 different riders have been on the podium this year in MotoGP. 14. It's incredible. Great series.
So competitive this year, and we spoke obviously a lot about the new British talent and that pool coming up. But obviously the huge news this year, Michael, Valentino Rossi's final year. But it looks like there are some great Italian aces emerging, particularly this year. Obviously we've got Pecco Bagnaia up there. You've got to look at also Bastianini's had a great run and form the last few races. So the Italian flag is not going to go anywhere despite Rossi leaving at the end of this year, is it?
No, definitely not. I think his legacy is well secure with his academy riders and the teams. Actually, he's going to have his MotoGP team and an influence on 2 Moto2 teams and a Moto3 team. So Valentino will be a very present figure in the paddock going forward. But I think, as you mentioned, Pecco on that current form, Bastianini really finding his feet and moving to the Gresini team, Digi stepping up into that team as well. We're going to lose Petrucci as well. Dobby's returning to the championship, so a legendary Italian name in there. So they are really well fixed. They're well positioned throughout the ranks, and I think Luca Marini quietly going about his rookie season will really step it up next year. So I do believe that they are. I think they're reaping the benefits of the work Valentino has put in with the academy in the last 5 to 10 years.
Let me ask you something, Michael. While you're here, I think Dovi. I mean, Valentino's his best ride this year has been an 8th place or something earlier on in the year, I think. Dovi comes straight back in. I mean, anybody in the know would automatically think that Dovi's going to not struggle, but certainly it's going to be a difficult task to be competitive straight away. But he's looking, for me, Quartararo aside, bloody good on that Yamaha. I wonder if he's going to give us a shock by the end of the year, whether he could.
I'd like to say so. I think the 2-day Misano test came perfectly positioned for him, so he got to dip his toes back into the paddock. Then he had a test and really figured it out, and then he was really strong in Austria, considering he's on the slowest bike in the grid. I think the speed of that bike's going to probably keep him off battling for the podium, but I think he'll be in the shout for a top 8 finish before the end of the season, which would be a really strong performance. But I do believe next season on similar machinery, getting a winter's testing under his belt and adapting to the Yamaha. So obviously, as you mentioned, we did expect him to struggle because of the the change in riding style from the Ducati that's imprinted in his subconscious. He just rides to late braking, stopping the thing, using the horsepower. Now he has to completely change his approach to every single corner. So he's really, I think, done well is he 34, 35? It's hard at that stage of your career to really completely adapt how you approach, and he's done that really well in such a short window. So there was a few things. There was the initial jump onto the bike and being at a similar level to Jake Dixon showed us actually Jake's level, but then obviously Dubby being given the time and with the experience he's got, then showing us that next step that Jake perhaps could have taken given the opportunity. But yeah, I'm excited to see Dubby back. I think he did have unfinished business, so I'm glad he's getting another opportunity. But yeah, also a little bit heartbroken for Jake that he won't get that opportunity in GP next year.
Yeah, well, it's a tough business, isn't it? If we come back to focusing a bit more on you, Michael, and again, more questions coming. I'm trying to get as many answers as I can. If I haven't got to a question, I can only apologise. But I will ask this one, which is a little plug for us, because from our Crash YouTube channel, so do make sure you check out that and give it a subscribe. Jordan, who does all our brilliant videos, wants to ask you, was there a moment when you rode in MotoGP when you saw a rider do something and just thought, wow, how has he done that?